Here we are on the M42 Adventures podcast. I'm your surprise host, Chase Seegmiller. So I take care of things with Two Adventures, the day-to-day, getting podcast guests, developing events, all those types of things. But I'm also the firearms and outdoor cooking coach on the Genesis. So, I do a lot of stuff here when it comes to, our online community and our adventures that we put on. So Rick's off on an adventure in Costa Rica, and it's kind of spotty out there. So I'm covering for him and getting this handled while he, has a lot of fun with our guests out there on the surfing trip in Costa Rica. So here we go. I got some questions here that have been developed, gotten all over the place. Some are in a firearms realm. Lots of people like to ask me questions about firearms since I'm the firearm mentor. The culinary world, I've been a chef for 23 years. So that's a world that lots of people like to dive into with me. I also have some other random ones, some from the Genesis, and so some of the new stuff going on. We're almost to the Genesis 250 giveaway. We have a few more members to join, and then that will launch, and that's going to be, a big thing. Whoever wins that is going to have quite the adventure ahead of them. The 2-night stay at Zion, Elevation 40 Zion. That's what it's called. And we're going to be doing quite a few different things there. We're going to be doing outdoor cooking, UTV, riding. We're going to do a little bit of hiking and some shooting. So there's a lot to pack in with that. So the lucky winner will be able to bring a guest, and we're really excited to be putting that on once we reach the 250 members. I'm also going to be doing some different things when it comes to firearms. We obviously have an event every month out there at Red Cliffs Rifle and Pistol Range. We just did the shoot house this past weekend. It went really well. Everybody had a really good time. It was well received, and it lasted a little bit longer than I thought it was going to last, but that's for another time. So we'll just jump in right here to the questions. Let's see what we got here. What's your personal EDC or everyday carry, and has it changed over the years? So yes, I think I bought my first pistol for EDC carry in 2012, maybe. Yeah, probably right around 2012. And that was a Springfield XDS 9mm single stacked. And I carried that for, I would guess about a decade. And then I ended up selling that pistol to Rick, our founder of M42. He really likes it. It's a great pistol. I've never had it fail on me, and so I figured it would be a really great, pistol for Rick as he was currently carrying a Ruger 380 and not real sufficient for personal protection, things like that. Sold that to him, and then I ended up picking up the SIG P365 AXG Legion, and that's a pistol I'm really proud of. It performs much like a larger pistol. It's very similar as far as, Titan tolerances to a 1911, and I'm very impressed with it. It shoots very, very, minimal recoil. It shoots very flat as far as, that recoil, getting back on target after that first shot. And I love it. It's not snappy at all for being 3.1 inches as far as the barrel's concerned. It is compensated, so that's definitely a benefit. But I would recommend it to anyone. My wife carries a P36 Rose, which that is also an excellent pistol, compensated, lower recoil, but a great concealed carry pistol. So definitely check those out if you aren't already in the realm for buying one of those. And then what's the next question? After 23 years in the culinary world, what's the most surprisingly simple dish that still blows people's minds? Well, after spending a little bit of time down in South America, I got slightly addicted to chimichurri. And while it doesn't contain a lot of ingredients, I tend to make mine with shallots, garlic, cilantro, parsley, red wine vinegar, olive oil, salt, and pepper. So like not very complicated. Sometimes I'll throw some chilies in there if I want it to be a little bit spicy, but it depends on what I'm pairing it with. And of course, just taking that and some grilled beef. I mean, you can do flank steak, a variety of different beefs, but chimichurri beef is something that is, just a simple sauce and beef. Most people don't think that that's going to be a really great dish, but it's one of my favorites. And I think if you haven't tried it, be on the lookout. And I might even end up putting a chimichurri recipe on the Genesis, which I think everybody would really love because when I do make it, it is a big hit. So, for something really simple, chimichurri is, I almost would call it the condiment of South America. I mean, it's one of those things kind of like chutney. There's a lot of different variations to it, but you'll find it in pretty much most regions of South America. So very simple to make, light, refreshing, but still kind of bold depending on how much garlic you put in it. So definitely try it if you haven't tried it before. I make a few different variations of it. Sometimes I smoke it just by throwing charcoal in it. So let's see, what's next? What's one lesson from your time as a chef that totally applies to running a firearms academy? That one's an interesting. So I would go with something like practice makes prepared. So in the culinary world, I often tell different kinds of people that you don't get good at anything until you've done it 1,000 times, and you don't really master anything until you've done it at least 10,000 times. So practicing something definitely gets you prepared for, being able to apply it. And, if you keep in mind that you have to do something that many times in order to be good at it or prepared to utilize it or use it as a skill, kind of makes you understand how much you have to actually do something before it becomes muscle memory or before you're even good at it. And I think when it comes to knife skills and firearms, if you don't use it, you lose it. So it's a diminishing skill. You're not going to obviously completely lose your comfortability and your confidence in those skills, but if you don't use them, you won't be as good with them. So definitely practice makes prepared. What else do we got going on here? So this one's a good one. If the Genesis had a motto you personally lived by, what would it be? So I think it already exists. I really have enjoyed the aspect of don't be a spectator. So in the relation to, the Genesis and our business at M42 Adventures in general, I think it's really important to be willing to get out there and try new things. So even if you're not good at them, really finding out if you are. You don't know until you actually get out there and try something. And being one of those people that, likes to dive in, I just go out and do some things sometimes. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not always good at them. And when I'm not, necessarily good, it kind of makes me want to do it more so that I can strive to, get at least a little bit better at it. There's some things that I know I'm not going to be the best skilled in. And, most of those things have to do with, swinging my large body around or being really limber. Like there's not a lot of things where I do that in my life, like gymnastics and things like that. So some of the things that require a little bit more nimbleness, I'm not great at. I'm 6'2", 250, so I try, but I know I'm never gonna be as good at that as a smaller, more functional person. Definitely play your strengths, but get out there, don't be a spectator. And try all those things that, might be difficult for you, make you uncomfortable. Basically anything that you don't, know that much about, maybe that scares you. That's a huge thing. Growth comes with discomfort. So I agree with the don't be a spectator, and definitely if you can help it, don't watch, join the fun, and just jump in wherever you can. Find some new things that stretch your boundaries, and it doesn't always have to be, something outside. Like what if you want to go do some paintings? I mean, it would be great to be outside and doing some painting of the great outdoors, but even if it's some just simple class of crafts, something to get you outside of your normal comfort, that's as much of an adventure as anything. And so I think every little step that you can make to getting yourself closer to that goal of getting outside and not being a spectator, that's where I'm at. So definitely don't be a spectator. Get out there, join the fun. Yeah, that's what's important. Get talking to people that are out there having the fun. If you're not already a part of the Genesis, definitely join the Genesis. Speak with the community. Hit any of our 9 mentors up in various fields and channels, and really just expand your knowledge of what you may or may not like. I always say try everything twice because it might be an acquired taste. Need some water. So jump back up to the firearms ones. So it says right here, what's your all-time favorite drill to run at the range and why? This is an interesting one. Normally, I'd probably just say something along the lines of, concealed carry build drill, because that's the most applicable to, a day-to-day thing that could happen. So I always want to be prepared for utilizing my concealed carry. So I practice with it. probably the most, and the bill drill because of the fact that it's operating the aspect of, drawing from concealment and then firing 6 shots, which is relatively the amount of shots that, at the sailing. I think it's like 10 total normally on average for, 2 people shooting at each other, the total shots fired. So, if you get in the habit of getting off those 6 shots on target right away, that's an important task. But also, I incorporate something that was brought up during it was actually yesterday's self-defense training about creating distance. So, one thing about carrying a firearm is you never want that firearm taken from you and then used against you. So, I try to practice being close to my target, right? Pushing away with either my non-dominant hand or both hands, creating that distance, then drawing, then taking those 6 shots. And what that does is it just gets me comfortable from like an altercation standpoint, and you don't want to draw your pistol while that person's still close enough to be able to take it from you. So if you create that distance, practice that process of backing up, then drawing your pistol and taking it into account and addressing that imminent threat. So I like to do that just to create movement and different things involving that. If you want to make it a little bit more difficult, just go through maybe multiple people around you. Feel like you're in a crowd. You can, surround yourself with different targets so that, you know which ones are the imminent threat and which aren't. There's a lot of different trainings you can do with that same drill, but it's important to apply your drills that you want to, use out on the range or even at home to the ones that are most practical to what you would use out there in public to protect yourself. Most people don't compete. I mean, there's not a huge amount of competitors out there in the pistol world in relation to how many people own pistols. So, you want to practice the skills that are going to make you better for your practical aspects, everyday use, things like that, because that's what it's going to be used for you in general. So whether that's, practicing at home from, drawing and getting those things done to, a few of the other things that you can do to get in the habit of being able to deal with the physiological and psychological aspects to, getting in a firefight. So, a lot of people laugh about people doing jumping jacks and push-ups and things like that and getting, tired and out of breath when they're training, but it's a real deal thing. You want to try and simulate that process as much as possible once you get to that level. I'm not saying that all you beginner shooters out there to, start doing these types of things, but once you get to the level where you feel comfortable enough to start, upping your level, your game, and as far as pistol practice is concerned, these are the types of things that you want to start thinking about. Where is it going to be when somebody comes into my house? Is it on me? Is it somewhere else? And then, going through the motions of that. So I'm a big advocate of practical shooting and the Second Amendment. So those are where most of my skills and teachings lie. I don't get too much into like the tactical John Wick aspects or, some of the more battle tactics. I just don't tend to do that because I don't think that it's as applicable to everyday life. So that's that one. All right. So there's one on here that says, what's your go-to meal when you're camping and too tired to be an adventure chef? So this actually comes from something that my mother, used to feed us all the time when we go camping. And it's really simple, but it kind of like, I don't eat hot dogs anymore. They have a lot of different things in them that I would prefer to be eating, but I do love meat. And so, I'll get myself a nice sausage. Just bring it along and some cheese and some tortillas. This is really simple. So we just wrap the sausage with the tortilla with the cheese inside, some tinfoil, throw it on some coals. It ends up melting together, creates a really nice, almost like sausage in a blanket, but in a tortilla. So it's really simple. It doesn't take any skill whatsoever, but it's nice and delicious, and it also reminds me of my mom. So that's a bonus to it. Next one, this one's a funny one. So, who inspires you more, Gordon Ramsay or John Wick? Honestly, I appreciate the skills of Gordon Ramsay, and if it's applicable, John Wick's skills as well. But they really do lean more towards the fictional aspects of firearms than the real ones, and as well as Gordon Ramsay, a lot of the aspects of him is kind of fictional. I've seen some things in recordings of him and such when he's not trying to be somebody on television and create the ratings and things like that. And I feel like his personality and the way that he deals with things is kind of blown out of proportion. He's good at what he does, and I respect his inspiration and the type of cooking that he does. But ultimately, I like to create my own world in the culinary world. I like to just kind of branch off and do the things that I like to do. I haven't gained too much inspiration from most chefs. I There's a great deal of inspiration that comes from Anthony Bourdain, but that's mostly in the realm of the lifestyle as a cook, what it takes to be a great chef, the ideals and the aspects and the lifestyle. And so those things I respect. Anybody who can make it through that and come out on top is pretty big to me. And John Wick, that guy's awesome. I mean, if he was a real person, it would be quite the feat of what he accomplishes on film. But ultimately, I'm never going to practice those types of skills. So, I don't get inspired too much by either one. If I see some real deal, people out there in public that are protecting themselves, their family, their community, or that are putting themselves in harm's way instead of, some other things, and they're not super skilled like John Wick. Those are the people that inspire me because they're not in that realm of lots of tactical skills, but they're still putting themselves out. They're still gaining that courage to get out there and protect their community. And that's ultimately, when it comes to firearms, what I'm about, not so much, the running and gunning kind of aspect. I do love a little bit of competition and things like that when it comes to firearms, but ultimately my main goal is to provide more knowledge towards the, personal protection aspects and concealed carry so that everyday people can be out there protecting their community, themselves and their family. So that's where I really want to go with it. And then what's the next question? If my life were a movie, what would it be called and what's the opening scene? I'm going to go with something along the lines of Fear and Loathing in Southern Utah, and that's just of, how my life evolved from all the different aspects, the lifestyle inside of a kitchen, and probably the opening scene would be me in a pair of shorts as a youngin' lighting part of the desert on fire. I was a little bit of pyro when I was young, so and it led to a very interesting life. And I spent a lot of time outside, a lot of time around horses, and also in my later years, in my adulthood, a lot of time in large cities around the country. So it's really kind of diverse, and a lot of it is I wouldn't say action packed, but just fun filled and a little bit of detriment. Now there's definitely things that went on that were very difficult. So it would be an interesting movie. I think even I would enjoy watching that one, but there's some things I wouldn't want to relive necessarily. So let's see. All right. What's something you believe deeply that most people would call crazy? So I tell this to people sometimes. I live in a world of impossibilities. I truly believe that there is nothing that's impossible. I see people do things that I thought were impossible every single day. And so living in a world of impossibilities, when somebody tells me something is impossible, I just look at them and think, well, that's not true. And most of this comes from early on. I definitely read a lot of comic books. I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z. So, my imagination goes places that allow me to, believe in things that most people just think are irrational. And then also Christ, reading scripture and the things that Christ could do. And, also the aspects of ye of little faith, like anything that you believe in completely and, in the Lord, you can accomplish. And so it's just one of those things. I know it's irrational to some people, but I literally live in a world where I believe that anything is possible through the aspects of faith and your ability to believe that you can accomplish them. And while some of the things that I believe are possible, I am not able to accomplish at this point in time in my life, I don't think that they're outside the realm of the ability to accomplish. While I might not have the skills to do it, it's not impossible. So some people think I'm crazy, but that's for another conversation. Now let's get back up to the firearms one. What's the biggest mistakes new shooters make and how do you fix it? Well, the biggest mistake new shooters make, it's always different, so I can't really pinpoint an exact one, but I would say, one of the biggest things that I see most new shooters doing is just not getting their grip high enough in that beaver tail or up on that, that frame to where you are only controlling, that slide itself and you're all the way up there so it doesn't have as much area to pivot on you. And I think that that's a key feature. I've definitely taught a few people that had been shooting their entire lives, and that simple factor just never applied to, what they were doing with their own firearms. And once they got that, their accuracy and those follow-up shots, things like that would experience if you're a little bit lower on the grip, it's bouncing all around, hard to reacquire. While if you have a complete control of that slide, nothing else is happening. The same thing applies to revolvers, only you can get quite a bit more back on that, that barrel on a revolver. And it also doesn't pivot. So I would say that's probably the most common. Other things are not paying attention to where your actual trigger is your finger is on the trigger. So a lot of people give it way too much finger. They'll be past or inside the joint right here. You always want to be between the tip and the joint. And depending on how large or small the frame is, your position of your grip is going to be different. So, you really have to find out what position of your finger fits the best for that exact pistol. So it's always different. And that's why it's hard to really kind of pinpoint what every beginner does wrong. So, but those are some key factors. Also, just grip. A lot of people, with a two-handed grip, a lot of people end up doing the cup and saucer thing. While it works, it's not super functional for, bracing the pistol and keeping it right where you want it. So for accuracy, not the best benefit. But I won't get into all of the aspects of, the mistakes that new shooters make. What is one firearm you think is totally overrated? A firearm that's totally overrated. I know some people are going to get mad at me on this one, but I just don't like the feel. And, I don't like most things about it. The ergonomics of it, the way that it feels. The AK-47. And while much like the Glocks, they will always shoot. They're great for their functionality. Don't know how accurate they are. Most of the times when I've shot them, they just didn't seem like they're super well built. And it's very similar to the Glock in that way for me. Like, there's nothing against Glock. They shoot reasonably accurate. They're reliable. But when you take one apart, when you're holding it, it feels janky. It feels like it's going to break, even though it's never going to. It feels like it is. And so in the aspects of the AK-47, I just don't like the way it feels when I shoot it. And so that's just something I don't like about it. It has nothing to do with its reliability, its function, accuracy. It's just not my type of firearm. And I know tons of people out there are really hyped up about them and really enjoy them. And I just don't. So I'm just going to say that that's a firearm that I feel is overrated just because of how popular it is. And I don't know why it's that popular. Let's just put it that way. What's the weird?
All right, let's take a minute and step away from this conversation real quick and talk about something that we have going on. So as many of you know, we launched our online community last year in September. So it's about 120 days old. We have about 130, 140 members now, growing daily. And it is free. So this is a community that has mentors in there. So we have about 10 mentors in there right now who are teaching everything from motorcycles, fitness, finances, travel, help me out, Chase, mental health,
and then we have relationships
hiking,
and family. Yeah, and then we have
self-defense.
With Teague.
He's firearms, outdoor cooking, travel. So these are people that are qualified, that we have vetted, that have been doing this for years and years and years in their respective fields, and they are in there teaching us about travel, about self-defense, about firearms, all these things that we have said. And it's not me. It's not my community. I built the structure, but it is professionals that are training me and others in their respective fields. And it is changing lives. I guarantee it. And again, it is free. So come on in. It also gives you the first right of refusal to any of our experiences. We're doing monthly experiences. We're doing 1 day, 3 days, 7-day experiences. You get first right of refusal. And then also we're doing a giveaway. So when we get to 250 members, we are going to be giving away an amazing adventure, which is 2 nights at Elevation 40 Zion, which you can check out, which is an amazing cabin here in Southern Utah. It's on social media. And We're going to be doing side-by-side shooting guns. You're going to be hanging out with me and a couple of the other mentors in the Genesis for the day. You'll get 2 nights there at the cabin, 3 days, and it is going to be an epic, epic adventure, and that is going to be given away free only to members of the Genesis once we hit 250, and it will be completely random. So hopefully we can see you in there. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Please like, share, rate it. And let's get back to this conversation.
Put it that way. What's the weirdest thing you've cooked outdoors, and did it slap or flop? All right. So recently, I mean, I don't know how many of you have seen, there was an Instagram post of me and Rick going up to Outpost X. So we're lucky enough for Rick's dad to have fallow deer and Barbados goats on his property that he raises for harvesting for, different people in the family, meat and things like that to go in the freezer. So we went up there and we decided to harvest a goat because we were invited out to Outpost X out there in Burrell, Utah, dry lake bed. And it was like a Viking retreat. We go up to New Harmony and pick out a goat. His dad tells us which ones are, available or need to be harvested. Rick gets out the 22, takes a shot. We end up in the pen. Wasn't really, I think for both of us, it was not a really desirable, eventful thing. Going out and hunting is one thing, when you track an animal and you go through the process of trying not to be, caught by your scent and different things, and it takes real effort. Shooting something in a pen isn't satisfying, and honestly, it felt a little sad, but we were going to, harvest this animal and eat it that day. So we're up there in the morning and we harvest this goat, and I drag it out of the pen after we bled it out and gave it a little blessing when nobody was watching. I just I always feel it's important to let the animals know that their sacrifice is appreciated. And so in that aspect, we killed it there. We gutted it while we were on the property in New Harmony, and we still had to take a couple hour trek up to Burrell. So with this animal still skin on, everything like that, Rick wanted to take it up and kind of go through the experience of skinning it there on property. And I think there was about 15 people on site for this Viking retreat. But one of the things I've never cooked before is, testicles. I've eaten Rocky Mountain oysters, and this goat was a male. So, it was a ram. And we, just kind of decided, we're going to be going up there, and, we always eat the heart and the liver. I mean, they're one of the most nutritious parts of the animal. But I'd never personally cooked testicles. And so we ended up at the store, grabbed some flour. I just mixed the flour with some of the Bearded Butcher's original seasoning, which is fantastic. Dredged after I blanched the testicles, dredged them in flour and fried them in bacon fat. Now, after I did this, I didn't expect anybody to really like it, or, even everyone to try it. I was surprised that even happened. But I cooked up both of them from the goat, that we just harvested. They are a little bit different on a goat than a cow. And so they were really delicate. I would almost say scallop-like once they were fried up, very, very tender and soft, but a little bit crispy from the breading and frying. And honestly, everybody there loved them. I was surprised. Honestly, I was surprised that everybody even tried it, much less really enjoyed it. I would never feed anybody something that I didn't eat, so I was the first to try it, and I thought it was good, but not in the aspects of how well received it was. It's one thing for somebody to be like, yeah, that was good. I endured it, or whatever. I mean, I don't expect anybody to be like, that was awesome. They were really, really impressed by it, and I was really happy that they all ate some. We went on from there to cook the heart. Did nice pan sear in the skillet on that, and then we did some liver and onions, and everybody loved it all. After that, we finished off the legs, so they were basically just brined and over the fire cooked. I would have tried to cook them a little bit more medium rare, but I was running out of daylight. They got more cooked than I would have wanted, but at least they were still tender and delicious. And I rubbed that Bearded Butcher seasoning all over those as well. And everybody had that and was well received as well. So for something out there in the middle of nowhere in some cast iron over a fire, doing something like that and then having it be that well received was surprising. And I was really impressed with everybody that tried it. So if any of you see this podcast, good on you. And I'm really stoked that you enjoyed it. What else do we got here? This one's a good one. Do you season your cast iron with more reverence than you season your firearms? Be honest. There's guns that run better when they're dirty. And I kind of feel the same way about cast iron. It takes a few times of cooking in it, probably like 10 or 12, and re-seasoning before you get something that produces that really great flavor that you want. So in aspects of that, when you have your nicer firearms, they require cleaning and lubing more than your Glocks or your standard SIGs. They're built to be able to kind of like be shot quite a bit and not have that gunk up and basically produce something that's going to cause your firearm to jam or anything like that. So there are some firearms that I own that require more cleaning, and I probably would say get seasoned more often than my cast iron. But honestly, cast iron tastes a little bit better when it's a little bit dirty. And like I said, some of the guns actually shoot better once they've been shot a little bit, when they're not perfectly clean. And I know that sounds crazy, but unless it's like a race gun or a competition gun, it really doesn't need to be perfectly clean or lubed every single time you use it. And so, I'll put, 500, 1,000 rounds through some of my lower class firearms, like my XDM Elite 10 millimeter. I've put hundreds and hundreds of rounds through that without cleaning it, and it still doesn't look that dirty. While I can go take my, SIG P322 out with the 22 long rifle ammo, and that thing will be just annihilated and dirty by the time I get done using it. And so, in those aspects, I would say I probably am more reverent and better at seasoning my guns than my cast iron, but it's only because of the flavor of the cast iron. And so unless it ends up, where I end up dirtying up my cast iron to the point where it needs to be washed and, like scrubbed and then need to be reseasoned, for the most part, it gets, a light little brushing out and then a little bit more bacon fat in it. And then it sits there until the next time I use it. And that's almost every single time I use it. So my cast iron might get it a little bit more than my lower class guns, but my Springfield 1911 DS, my new AXG Legion P365 from SIG, those I clean constantly. Pretty much every single time I get done with them, I take them home, clean them back up so that when I go back out with them, they're already ready to go. And I probably run them more than any other pistols I have. And then when it comes to my ARs, I usually just throw more lube in them, depending on what is happening. I mean, if they start gunking up to the point where they malfunction, I'll start cleaning them a little bit more. But yeah, that's kind of like hit or miss depending on the guns and the cast iron, because cast iron definitely gets a lot of attention, but my better guns, my more expensive, performance guns, those also get a lot of attention. So good question though. I gotta admit. All right. Would you rather go 6 months without seasoning or 6 months without shooting? Well, I feel like I can create some great flavor with, some fire and maybe some wood. So I don't think that I necessarily need seasoning to perform and create a good meal, but it does help. Now, if I didn't shoot for 6 months, I don't know how that would turn out necessarily as far as, diminishing skill and things like that. And I would probably get depressed. So I'm gonna go with I would be better off with no seasoning for 6 months because I can live with that, a little bit of bland food. But I've come to the point in my life where I've realized that if I don't do something along the lines of shooting or something that I'd be like not being able to work out at all for 6 months. I would get a little bit depressed. I don't really like those types of situations where I don't get to be active in the things that I enjoy. But I'm also strong enough to deal with those things. I definitely would go with no seasoning over no shooting. All right. How did the Genesis community start, and what's your actual role in keeping it alive and thriving? All right, that's an interesting one. M42 Adventures. And while I was not here in the creation of M42 Adventures, I have been here almost since the beginning of the Genesis. And, I signed on as the firearm coach and the outdoor cooking coach about a month into it opening up and launching. And then we kind of just pushed it a little bit. So I was just attached as just being the mentor and coach for the Firearms and Outdoor Cooking channel at first. And then Rick asked me if I could come on and help him out a little bit more with the Genesis, create some more things. So at this point in time, I run most of the back end of the Genesis. So, when you get messages from admin, launching the weekly challenges, developing the circle, the map, all of those aspects I help develop. But when it comes to like most of the information that was already in the Genesis for all of the 26 channels that was performed and put in there by a crew that was working with us, before, and they did a really great job on that. There's so much information in there, and so basically I just help maintain all that at this point. I find new mentors for the channels. So I'm pretty much constantly trying to find new people that have the ability and the time to be mentors, and also that desire to be of service that is so important with the Genesis. So I do a lot when it comes to running the Genesis and keep it thriving. I'm constantly trying to innovate with new ideas and things to get people engaged. I'm sure as well as I'm sure you all know that a lot of people can be a part of a community, but it's the part of getting them all involved and talking to each other as well as the mentors, and really embracing the community for what it is and utilizing it. And that's really what we want it to do. And it's one of those things that's completely free. There's no financial information even gathered on the Genesis. So you just put in your name and email address and you're off to the races. And then you go in and you'll have a member checklist. They'll go through all the options to kind of get you understanding how to operate on the Genesis as well. And so with our current mentors, we have 9, which are mentoring 11 of the channels, and I'm currently working on trying to find more. It's just one of those things where they have to be the right fit. And so, while I've been interviewing and talking to several people, nobody's been able to like hit all the markers. Either somebody doesn't have quite enough time, or, they need to be functioning on something that actually, makes them a little bit of money. And so we're wanting to keep the Genesis free forever. And so it requires a great deal of the ability to be of service, but also we're working towards being able to, have everything kind of funded and operating, and the events that we put on, like the larger events that Rick is on right now in Costa Rica. So that event, is going on right now, and that's helping fund whatever costs the Genesis has. My firearm events that I put on every single month, that's going to fund the Genesis. So it's a process and we're working at it. And all of the mentors, definitely give them a round of applause for doing and being a part of the Genesis, and being there for all of the members. And if you're not already a part of the Genesis, I suggest signing up and going and taking part in that. We are almost to the Genesis 250 giveaway. I think we need 5 more members at this point, and then that will launch and we will have a winner of that. I'm super excited about that. That's going to be pretty big, as well as my outdoor cooking adventures. I'm working on that. I'm trying to develop a system that makes it so that basically 10 couples can come out, or friends, whatever, 2 people in a group. So 10 of those, we can come out and I can teach you how to cook over a fire in Dutch ovens and whatnot. So I've got a couple of recipes that I'm trying to develop that'll be simple enough and also not take 4 to 5 hours to cook, that we can accomplish out there in the outdoors with everyone. So be on the lookout for that, as well as any of the larger events that we'll be putting on throughout the year. There's still Alaskan fishing. There's going to be horseback riding, UTVs, all that we did last year as well in this year. So we'll get all those out and that information in. If someone handed you a squirrel, a lemon, and a blowtorch, what's for dinner? Man. So, that acid's going to help break down that really lean meat on that squirrel. So I'm definitely going to be coating it in that, a little bit of salt, picking up every single plant that I can think of that would help me season that squirrel, throwing it on a spigot and putting it over a fire. So it's going to be roast squirrel, most definitely, a little bit of, might call it lemon pepper squirrel if I have some pepper with me. It wouldn't be too difficult. With those leaner animals, you definitely got to have something that helps break down that tissue. It's still going to be a little tough. If you've ever seen how squirrels act, they are skittish animals, which means they are super hyperactive. I'm pretty sure they're on the constant verge of having a heart attack. But that's realistically what I would do with that. What do you love most about mentoring people through the Genesis and M42 Adventures? So while this can I mean, I guess this could be construed as mentoring in a way, but my favorite thing is being of service. I've developed the desire and the true kind of ability to mentor. And I think that after you've developed enough knowledge inside of any subject, that you eventually come to the point in time where, you're a teacher. And that's kind of where I'm at right now is I've developed enough knowledge in a few different fields that I can pass that knowledge along and give people at least enough information to start their own journey. And that's the main goal of the Genesis, is to get you knowledgeable enough to get out there on your own adventures. Now, while I would love to be able to plan out and do every single adventure and event for you, I'm only located in southern Utah right now, and I'm working on branching out all the adventures all over the country. And obviously, we have the larger adventures around the world. But when it comes to the smaller ones, I pretty much have to deal with what we're dealing with here in southern Utah. Plus, we operate on most of the seasons. We only shut down for a small amount of time, in the middle of winter out here, and that's if it's even that cold of a winter. Having operations down here has its benefits as far as adventure is concerned. So, but what it really comes down to is my ability to be able to pass on the gifts that I have acquired in this life. And a lot of people don't look at skills as gifts, but I might not have a whole bunch of money, but I definitely have spent a time acquiring a lot of skills that basically make my life a lot easier without the assistance of other people, because I can do most things in my daily life by myself. So I just really love having the ability and the opportunity, and even kind of like the ability to broadcast myself out to so many people, because it's a lot wider of a broadcast than I can do here in my own community. While St. George is growing, very fast, it still is very small. It's still under 250,000 people, I believe. It might be a little bit higher than that, but the main thing is it's fairly small when it comes to a city, and so there's only so many people that I can reach when it comes to each of the events, whether it's outdoor cooking or firearms. And I do volunteer at our local range, so like I get in some service that way as well. And if I could do this all, if I could survive in a daily life, I would do everything that I do for free. Realistically, that's what I would do with my life, is just spend my time inspiring others, just getting out, having some fun in different realms with myself. I mean, I would just go out and start doing everything with people, taking them out camping, showing them how to set up camps, survival techniques, all of this stuff. I was definitely out in the desert just playing around all the time, and you develop skills that are applied to being able to survive, because something happens, you got to be prepared for it. So, I spent a lot of time as a kid doing that, and I want everybody to have that same opportunity to develop that same skill set and that same confidence when it comes to everyday stuff, not letting the world overcome them. So that's pretty big for me. This is a good one. So what does a typical day look like juggling all of your roles? Or is there such a thing as typical? Yeah, it's not typical. There's not a typical day. Every day is different. I mean, technology runs into things. Weather. There's so many things that have to be taken into account, or even just accepted, that you're unable to control, especially when it comes to weather, things like that. When technology fails, there's a lot of different aspects to doing this, when it comes to from being like a producer to, what would you call that? Like a casting director. So, finding people for podcasts, just finding other people to be able to do events in different realms around the country. You become kind of a whole, everything that has to do with the business in a way is what happens. And then things pop up every single day that you weren't expecting. And so typical, no, there's no such thing as typical, but for the most part, it is all revolved around inspiration and building adventures. So, the experiences and the inspiration are two of the key points. So all of them really revolve around those aspects, like getting new mentors, creating events that will get you outside and growing in those experiences, and getting to know yourself a little bit better. You don't really know much about yourself unless you know where your limit lies. And so really finding that. So yeah. All right. It says right here, you meet someone totally new to the Genesis. What's the first experience you want them to have? Well, honestly, I would say that, going through the live Zooms, just going through and seeing, what we have to offer from the different mentors, just diving into things that you think you might be interested in. I don't think that there would be anything necessarily, you know, concrete when it comes down to that. The first experience you want them to have, I mean, the first experience I'd really want them to have is whatever experience makes them feel, the most growth or the most, inspiration. So that would be different for everyone. I want it to be the thing that really inspires them the most. So from just going in and diving into information that you think you might be interested in. So like on the channels that might spark some love and desire in you, going in there, reading that information. And if there isn't a mentor in that channel, maybe reaching out to people that are inside that realm of expertise until we actually get a mentor, or reaching out to the mentors in the realms that you already have interest in, and finding out the different areas that you might have trouble in. I always tell people one of the hardest things about jumping into shooting is the aspect of going through all of the different equipment and things that, you know, troubleshooting that kind of stuff. And then you end up buying all kinds of things that don't work for you, or you get the wrong kind of advice from someone who barely knows anything but feels like they know everything. And so it's really about, just getting through all that stuff without having to go through that. And so, building that knowledge beforehand and then asking the right questions and finding people that are in the community around yourself that actually do those things. Then going out, not being a spectator and jumping in and joining those aspects. You're never going to, find the aspects or be able to just do it alone. You got to find out what you like, how it inspires you, how it's going to make you grow. And then once you know that that's the subject or the expertise that you want to get into or hobby, then you take that information and you need to find things around you if you're not around an area that, has, a lot of people, or you don't have friends in that area. I mean, when I first started getting into shooting, I didn't have a lot of friends that were big into doing anything other than hunting, right? So lots of friends that hunted, but what did that entail? That entailed just going out, once or twice a year and sighting in your rifles to make sure you can still shoot, that it's still on, and then going out and hunting. I'm the type of person that wants to shoot every day, and that's something I'm going to gear towards at least doing for, a year straight. So that'll be an interesting thing to dive into. But that right there is something that you need to, develop. Like, what things do you really want to do? And once you do that, gain some information. The information, the knowledge takes out the fear. Once the fear is gone, then you're much more likely to get out and do it. But the fear is never really going to be gone until you experience it. So the unknown is what causes that fear. Once you experience it, it slowly kind of chips away and you become better and better, more confident at it. But it's going to be there all the time. I tell people when I go do a competition, I always go over to the range, next door or another bay, anything that I can go shoot, a good 50 rounds, get my greased up, just because of those first things, that anxiety or even excitedness of first going out every single time happens to me every single time. So I have to go through the motions and get that excitedness out, that adrenaline, to be able to really function at my best when I'm out there competing. So, there's a lot of things to take and to know yourself about. So take all those things into account, just it's going to make you a better person and, a better shooter, or better at whatever hobby it is that you have. I always jump on to shooting or cooking because those are the things that I do most. But I'm sure you can find the same ways to approach it in your own life. That's what I would go about it. I would just find the things that are going to make you inspired and really run with that. Like I said, sometimes it requires a little bit of trying and failing and trying and failing. And sometimes failing is the funnest part, just knowing that you can still, not succeed and keep on going forward and actually see that clear path of where you're going to succeed down the line. Well, I think that's pretty much everything we have for today. Thank you for joining us on the M42 Adventures podcast. This is my first time ever hosting. Usually I'm just behind the screen and you might hear my voice a little bit from back there, but it was a pleasure. I hope you enjoy this episode and the different things we got to talk about. Hopefully I can, make it back on and do some other things on the podcast. But thank you very much. You have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.